Hey guys, tonight we dive into the absolutely ridiculous history of humanity's most beloved nemesis, the alarm clock. That innocent looking device sitting next to your bed, plotting to ruin your morning with the enthusiasm of a Roman centurion discovering an unpolished shield. So before we begin this tale of sleep deprivation and technological warfare, go ahead and like the video if you enjoy having your relationship with time thoroughly examined, and subscribe if you want more stories about everyday objects that secretly control your life. Let me know in the comments what ungodly hour your alarm is set for tomorrow. I promise not to judge your life choices. Now grab your coffee, silence that notification, and let's explore how we went from monks with water buckets to smartphones that know exactly when you're most vulnerable to consciousness. So, you think you understand your alarm clock? Adorable. Like thinking you understand why medieval people thought ringing bells at 3 a.m. was a reasonable solution to anything. Before you could even dream of hitting snooze 9 times and still being late for work, someone had to invent the very concept of being rudely awakened by an inanimate object. The alarm clock didn't just appear overnight like some sort of punctual miracle. No, it crawled out of humanity's desperate need to wake up when they absolutely didn't want to, which, let's be honest, is basically every morning since the dawn of consciousness. Picture this: you're a monk in medieval Europe. Your job? Wake up at ungodly hours to pray, because apparently God doesn't sleep in. But here's the problem. You're human, which means you're fundamentally programmed to enjoy unconsciousness. So what do? You can't exactly set your iPhone to buzz at 3 a.m. because, shocking news, iPhones don't exist yet. Neither does electricity, or even decent plumbing. You're living in a world where the most advanced technology is a water wheel, and even that's considered pretty fancy. The monks, bless their sleep-deprived souls, became the first people to really, truly understand the existential horror of mandatory early rising. They needed to wake up for matins, the middle of the night prayer service that made absolutely no sense to anyone who wasn't completely devoted to divine worship or utterly insane. Possibly both. These weren't lazy people. These were individuals who had voluntarily given up every earthly pleasure known to humanity. Good food, comfortable beds, interesting conversation, and yes, sleeping until your body naturally wanted to wake up. So they developed what might charitably be called the world's first alarm system, though calling it an alarm is like calling a medieval plague a minor health inconvenience. The process went something like this: one monk, the designated human rooster, would stay awake all night. His job was to stare at candles, watch shadows move across sundials, and basically become a living, breathing countdown timer. When he decided it was time for everyone else to wake up, he'd walk through the monastery clanging a bell with the enthusiasm of someone who had clearly given up on the concept of making friends. But here's where it gets interesting. The monks realized that relying on one person to stay awake all night was about as reliable as expecting a cat to guard your goldfish. Humans, even deeply religious ones, have this annoying tendency to fall asleep when they're tired. Revolutionary concept, right? So they started experimenting with mechanical solutions, because apparently even in the Dark Ages, people understood that machines were more dependable than Dave from the scriptorium, who kept nodding off during his watch shifts. The first real breakthrough came with water clocks, or clepsydre, which sounds like a sneeze, but was actually a reasonably clever bit of engineering. Picture a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Water drips out at a steady rate, and when the water level hits a certain point, it triggers a mechanism. Maybe it's a bell, maybe it's a gong, maybe it's just a really loud CLONK that makes everyone jump out of their beds wondering if the monastery is under attack by Vikings. These water clocks were the Ferrari of medieval timekeeping, which is to say they worked about as well as you'd expect something made by people who thought bathing was optional, and that diseases were caused by bad smells. The water would freeze in winter, making your alarm clock about as useful as a chocolate teapot. In summer, the water would evaporate, leaving you with what was essentially an expensive bucket. And if someone accidentally kicked the thing over, well, congratulations, you've just invented the snooze function. Except, instead of 9 minutes, you get to sleep until someone notices you're missing from morning prayers. But the monks persisted, because that's what monks do. They're like the world's most patient engineers, except instead of building bridges, they're trying to solve the fundamental problem of human sleep cycles. They started adding weights and pulleys and all sorts of mechanical complications that would make Rube Goldberg weep with joy. Picture this contraption. A candle burns down, which releases a weight, which pulls a string, which rings a bell, which hopefully wakes up everyone within a 3-mile radius. The beauty of these early alarm systems wasn't their reliability, because they were about as reliable as weather predictions made by throwing chicken bones at a wall. No, the beauty was their complete inability to be ignored. When a modern alarm clock goes off, you can hit snooze. You can turn it off. You can throw it across the room and go back to sleep. But when a medieval monk alarm goes off, it's not just making noise. It's making the kind of noise that suggests either the monastery is on fire or the apocalypse has begun. Either way, you're probably going to want to wake up and investigate. Now, while the monks were busy terrorizing themselves awake at absurd hours, the rest of medieval society was developing their own relationship with early rising. Farmers, for instance, had perhaps the most reliable alarm clock ever invented: roosters. These feathered sociopaths would start screaming at the first hint of dawn, whether you wanted to wake up or not. The rooster doesn't care about your feelings. The rooster doesn't care that you stayed up late because the neighbor's cow got loose again. The rooster has one job, and that job is to make sure everyone within a 5-mile radius knows exactly when the sun is thinking about maybe possibly rising in the next hour or two. But roosters, for all their dependable obnoxiousness, had their limitations. They could be eaten by foxes. They could get sick. They could just decide, for reasons known only to themselves, to take a day off. And if you were a city dweller, keeping a rooster in your tiny apartment was about as practical as keeping a wolf as a pet. Sure, it might work, but your neighbors were going to have some serious complaints. This is where things start to get genuinely weird, because humans are nothing if not creative when it comes to solving problems that didn't really need to exist in the first place. In ancient Rome, they had slaves whose entire job was to wake people up. Imagine that career path. So, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a professional annoyer. I specialize in interrupting people's dreams at inconvenient hours. These human alarm clocks would stand outside their master's bedroom and either knock on the door, call out the time, or just generally make enough noise to ensure that sleep was no longer possible. The Romans, being Romans, couldn't just leave it at having human alarm clocks. They had to complicate things, because complicating things was basically the Roman national pastime. They developed elaborate water clocks that could not only tell time, but could also ring bells, blow whistles, and even make mechanical birds sing. Yes, mechanical birds. Because apparently when you're waking someone up at dawn, what you really need is the sound of fake birds chirping in addition to all the other noise. These Roman water clocks were engineering marvels that would have impressed NASA if NASA's primary goal was to annoy people into consciousness. They had bronze gears and marble chambers and intricate systems of tubes and valves that would make a modern engineer weep with confusion. And they worked, sort of, most of the time, assuming the water didn't freeze, the mechanisms didn't jam, and nobody had accidentally knocked over any of the important bits while stumbling around in the dark. But here's the thing about ancient alarm systems. They weren't really personal. If you were rich enough to afford a fancy water clock or a team of wake-up slaves, great. But if you were just a regular person trying to make a living, your alarm clock was either a rooster, the sun, or your bladder. And frankly, your bladder was probably the most reliable of the three. This situation persisted for centuries, because technological innovation in the field of waking people up against their will wasn't exactly a high priority for most of human civilization. People had other concerns, like not dying of plague, not being eaten by wolves, and figuring out how to grow enough food to survive the winter. The luxury of being woken up by a mechanical device was reserved for the very wealthy, the very religious, or the very unlucky slaves whose job it was to be living alarm clocks. Then came the medieval period, and with it, a revolution in timekeeping that nobody saw coming. The mechanical clock, that marvel of gears and springs and incomprehensible engineering, began appearing in church towers across Europe. These weren't alarm clocks in the modern sense. They were more like communal announcements that time was passing whether you liked it or not. When the church bells rang, everyone in the village knew what time it was, and more importantly, they knew whether they were supposed to be working, praying, or sleeping. The church bells were democracy in action. If democracy was a system where a giant bronze object got to decide when your day started, rich or poor, noble or peasant, everyone heard the bells. You couldn't ignore them, you couldn't turn them off, and you certainly couldn't hit snooze and get 9 more minutes of sleep. When those bells rang at dawn, your day had officially begun, whether you were ready for it or not. But individual alarm clocks, still the stuff of fantasy for most people. If you needed to wake up at a specific time, you had a few options, none of them particularly reliable. You could try to train yourself to wake up naturally, which worked about as well as trying to train a cat to do your taxes. You could ask someone else to wake you up, which was fine until that person decided they didn't particularly care whether you made it to your appointment or not. Or you could just accept that punctuality was a luxury you couldn't afford and hope for the best. The real breakthrough in personal alarm technology came during the Industrial Revolution. Because nothing motivates innovation quite like the need to get thousands of workers to show up at exactly the same time every single day. Factories didn't run on whenever you feel like showing up time. They ran on, if you're not here when the whistle blows, you don't get paid time, which turned out to be a remarkably effective motivator for punctuality. Suddenly, everyone needed to wake up at specific times, not just monks and roosters. Factory workers, office clerks, shopkeepers, entire populations of people who had previously operated on sun up to sundown. Schedules now needed to coordinate their sleep cycles with industrial machinery. And industrial machinery, as it turns out, doesn't care about your natural circadian rhythms any more than a medieval monastery bell did. This created a massive market for alarm clocks, which enterprising inventors were more than happy to fill. The first patent for a mechanical alarm clock was filed in 1787 by Levi Hutchins, an American who was clearly tired of oversleeping and missing whatever it was people had to do at 4 a.m. in 1787. Probably something involving livestock. Hutchins' alarm clock was a masterpiece of single-minded determination. It had one setting, 4 a.m. That was it. No adjustments. No different wake-up times for different days. Just a mechanical device that would start ringing at 4 in the morning and wouldn't stop until you got up and turned it off. It was like having a rooster that never took a day off, never got eaten by foxes, and never decided to sleep in because it was feeling under the weather. The genius of Hutchins' design was its complete inflexibility. Modern alarm clocks give you options. Different times, different days, snooze functions, gradually increasing volume. Hutchins' clock offered none of these conveniences because Hutchins understood something that modern alarm clock designers seem to have forgotten. If you give people options, they will find ways to avoid waking up. But if you give them a mechanical device that starts screaming at 4 a.m. every single day without exception, they will eventually accept that resistance is futile and adjust their sleep schedules accordingly. But one alarm clock setting wasn't going to work for everyone, because not everyone needed to wake up at 4 a.m. to milk cows or whatever Hutchins was doing with his life. Other inventors began creating adjustable alarm clocks, mechanical marvels of springs and gears that could be set to different times depending on your personal schedule and tolerance for morning misery. These early adjustable alarm clocks were triumphs of mechanical engineering and human stubbornness. Setting them required the kind of precision usually reserved for watchmaking or surgery. You had to win the spring just right, set the hands to exactly the correct position, and hope that nothing went wrong with the dozens of tiny moving parts that somehow had to work together to wake you up at the precise moment you had requested. And when they worked with the subtlety of a Viking raid. Early alarm clocks didn't ease you gently into consciousness with gradually increasing volume or pleasant sounds. They started screaming immediately at maximum volume and continued screaming until you physically got out of bed and made them stop. There was no snooze button because the concept of just 5 more minutes hadn't been invented yet. When your alarm went off, you had exactly 2 choices: get up or lie there listening to mechanical shrieking until you went insane. The alarm clock industry really took off in the mid-1800s, when factories and railroads created a society-wide obsession with punctuality. Trains ran on schedules measured in minutes, not hours. Factory shifts began at precise times, not sometime after sunrise. Suddenly, being late wasn't just inconvenient, it was economically catastrophic. This created what historians call the tyranny of the clock. Though they probably called it that from the comfort of university offices, where showing up 15 minutes late to a lecture was considered fashionably bohemian rather than a firing offense. For everyone else, the clock became the supreme authority governing daily life. You ate when the clock said it was meal time. You worked when the clock said it was work time. And you slept when the clock said you could sleep, which was never long enough and always ended too soon. Clock manufacturers responded to this demand with increasingly elaborate alarm mechanisms. Spring-driven bells, rotating gongs, mechanical hammers that would pound on metal plates. Anything that would make enough noise to wake up someone who really didn't want to be awake yet. Some alarm clocks featured multiple bells for people who were particularly heavy sleepers or particularly dedicated to avoiding consciousness. The most ambitious alarm clock inventors began creating devices that didn't just make noise, but actively forced you to get out of bed. These included alarm clocks connected to mechanical devices that would pull your blankets off, tip your bed over, or even spray you with cold water. Because apparently some people looked at a regular alarm clock and thought, you know what this needs? The ability to physically assault me while I'm sleeping. The one particularly enthusiastic inventor created an alarm clock that fired a pistol when it went off, which seems like the kind of idea that sounds brilliant at 2 a.m. when you're desperately trying to solve your chronic oversleeping problem, but probably seemed less brilliant the first time it accidentally shot a hole in your bedroom wall. The patent application for this device presumably read something like, alarm clock for people who want to wake up quickly and also potentially die in the process. But the real revolution in alarm clock technology came with the development of mass production techniques. Early alarm clocks were handmade by skilled craftsmen, which meant they were expensive, relatively rare, and about as reliable as you'd expect from something assembled by a single person working with hand tools in a dimly lit workshop. But mass production changed everything. Suddenly, alarm clocks could be manufactured by the thousands in factories using standardized parts and assembly line techniques. This made them cheaper, more reliable, and available to pretty much anyone who needed to wake up at a specific time. The alarm clock went from being a luxury item for the wealthy to a necessity for anyone participating in industrial society. The Westclocks Company, founded in 1885, became the General Motors of alarm clocks, churning out millions of mechanical timepieces designed to interrupt the sleep of hard-working Americans everywhere. Their most famous model, the Big Ben alarm clock, was basically the Ford Model T of wake-up devices. Simple, reliable, affordable, and loud enough to wake the dead. The Big Ben alarm clock was a masterpiece of practical design. It had a large, easy-to-read face, a dependable mechanical movement, and an alarm that could probably be heard in the next county. Setting it required no special training or advanced engineering degree. You just turned a few knobs and hoped for the best. And when it went off with the enthusiasm of a fire engine responding to a 5-alarm blaze. But even as alarm clocks became more common and more reliable, people continued to have a complicated relationship with them. On one hand, they were undeniably useful. They allowed you to wake up at specific times, coordinate with other people, and participate in the increasingly time-conscious society that was developing around industrial schedules. On the other hand, they were mechanical torturers whose primary function was to interrupt the most pleasant part of your day, sleep, and force you to begin the least pleasant part, work. This fundamental contradiction led to what might be called the alarm clock arms race. As alarm clocks became more effective at waking people up, people became more creative at avoiding being woken up. They would put their alarm clocks across the room, so they had to physically get out of bed to turn them off. They would set multiple alarms at different times to ensure at least one of them worked. They would wind their clocks extra tight to make sure they wouldn't stop ringing before successfully completing their mission of human awakening. Meanwhile, alarm clock manufacturers responded by making their devices even more obnoxious. Louder bells, more persistent ringing, mechanical movements that wouldn't stop until you performed increasingly complex sequences of actions to turn them off. Some alarm clocks required you to solve puzzles or perform mathematical calculations before they would stop ringing, operating on the theory that if you were awake enough to do math, you were awake enough to start your day. The relationship between humans and their alarm clocks became almost adversarial. People would try to outsmart their clocks by setting them fast to trick themselves into thinking they were running late. Alarm clocks, being mechanical devices with no capacity for deception, would continue to ring at exactly the time they were set to ring, regardless of what the displayed time said. This led to elaborate psychological games, where people would set their clocks to different times, forget which clocks were set fast and which were set correctly, and end up in a state of permanent temporal confusion that somehow still resulted in being late for everything. The invention of the snooze function in the 1950s was supposed to solve this problem by giving people a few extra minutes of sleep without completely oversleeping. The snooze button was marketed as a humane compromise between the demands of punctuality and the natural human desire to remain unconscious indefinitely. You could get a little more sleep, but not so much that you'd miss your obligations entirely. What actually happened was that the snooze button became the most used button on the alarm clock, pressed repeatedly by people who had no intention of getting up the first time their alarm went off, or the second time, or the third time. The 9-minute snooze interval became a new unit of time measurement, like a very short hour for people who were perpetually running late. The snooze button enabled entirely new forms of self-deception. People would set their alarms earlier than necessary, knowing they would hit snooze multiple times, creating elaborate calculations of, if I set my alarm for 60 and hit snooze 3 times, I'll actually get up at 60:27, which gives me just enough time to shower and grab coffee before my 7:30 meeting. These calculations were invariably wrong, because they failed to account for the fact that someone who hits snooze 3 times is probably also the kind of person who hits snooze 4 times, or 5 times, or until they're running so late that getting ready becomes an Olympic sport. Electric alarm clocks, introduced in the early 20th century, promised to solve many of the reliability problems that plagued mechanical clocks. No more winding springs, no more mechanisms that would slowly lose accuracy over time, no more alarm bells that would gradually get quieter as the spring wound down. Electric clocks were powered by the electrical grid, which meant they would keep perfect time as long as the power stayed on, and their alarms would ring with consistent volume until manually turned off. But electric alarm clocks introduced their own problems. Power outages would stop the clock entirely, causing people to oversleep because their alarm never went off. This led to the development of battery backup systems, which meant that alarm clocks now required both electrical power and batteries, doubling the number of things that could go wrong. Electric clocks also enabled the development of radio alarm clocks, devices that would wake you up not with the sound of ringing bells, but with whatever was playing on the radio at the time your alarm was set to go off. This seemed like a more pleasant way to wake up than being assaulted by mechanical clanging, and for people whose radio stations played gentle music in the morning, it probably was. But radio alarm clocks had their own unique form of cruelty. Instead of waking up to the sound of bells, you might wake up to a commercial for used car sales, a news report about some terrible disaster, or a talk radio host discussing topics that were far too intense for someone who had just achieved consciousness. There's something particularly surreal about being jolted awake by a passionate discussion of municipal bond referendums or a detailed description of traffic accidents on highways you don't even drive on. The worst radio alarm clock experience was waking up to a song you actually liked, because then you'd lie in bed listening to it instead of getting up, which defeated the entire purpose of the alarm. Or you'd wake up to a song that was so annoying that it would get stuck in your head for the entire day, turning your alarm clock into a psychological weapon that continued its assault long after you'd turned it off. Digital alarm clocks arrived in the 1970s and promised to solve all the problems that had plagued their mechanical and electric predecessors. Digital displays were easier to read than clock faces, especially for people who weren't fully conscious. Digital time setting was more precise than trying to position mechanical hands, and digital alarms could offer features that were impossible with mechanical systems: multiple alarms, different alarm sounds, gradually increasing volume. But digital alarm clocks also introduced the concept of the blinking 1200, that universal symbol of technological defeat that appeared whenever the power went out and reset the clock to its default setting. The blinking 1200 became a minor cultural icon, representing humanity's complicated relationship with technology and our tendency to live with minor inconveniences rather than spending the 30 seconds required to fix them. Digital alarm clocks also made it easier to set precise wake-up times, which paradoxically made people more likely to oversleep. With mechanical clocks, setting your alarm for 6:30 am was an approximation. The actual time might be 6:28 or 6:32, depending on how carefully you position the hands. But digital clocks let you set your alarm for exactly 6:30, which somehow made hitting the snooze button and sleeping until 6:39 feel like a more significant transgression against punctuality. The proliferation of alarm clock features in the digital age created a new problem complexity. Early alarm clocks had one function: make noise at a predetermined time. Digital alarm clocks could have dozens of functions: multiple alarms, different alarm sounds, weekday scheduling, sleep timers, radio presets, display brightness controls. Learning to operate a modern alarm clock required reading an instruction manual, and reading instruction manuals is not something most people wanted to do when they were trying to solve the simple problem of waking up at a specific time. This complexity led to what might be called alarm clock feature creep, where manufacturers kept adding more and more functions to distinguish their products from the competition. Some alarm clocks could simulate sunrise by gradually brightening a built-in light. Others could play nature sounds or white noise to help you fall asleep. Some could monitor your sleep patterns and wake you up during lighter sleep phases. Some could connect to the internet and display weather forecasts or news headlines. All of these features were designed to improve the alarm clock experience, but they also meant that alarm clocks were no longer simple, reliable devices that performed one function well. They were complex electronic systems with multiple points of failure, and when they failed, they tended to fail in creative ways that their mechanical predecessors never could. A mechanical alarm clock that stopped working would simply stop working. You'd wind it up, and nothing would happen, or the alarm wouldn't ring when it was supposed to. But a digital alarm clock could fail in dozens of different ways. The display might work, but the alarm might not. The alarm might work, but only on weekdays. The radio might work, but not the buzzer. The snooze function might get stuck in an infinite loop. The clock might randomly reset itself to the wrong time zone. The smartphone revolution of the 2000s seemed poised to solve all alarm clock problems forever. Smartphones could keep perfect time by synchronizing with atomic clocks via cellular networks. They could have unlimited alarms set to different times, different days, different sounds. They could gradually increase volume, play your favorite songs, or even wake you up with personalized messages. And since everyone already had a smartphone, there was no need to buy a separate alarm clock device. But smartphones also introduced entirely new categories of alarm clock problems. Dead batteries meant no alarm. Software crashes meant no alarm. Accidental airplane mode activation meant no alarm. Apps updating themselves overnight and changing their notification settings meant no alarm. Smartphones were incredibly capable alarm clocks when they worked, but they were also complex computers, running dozens of applications simultaneously, any one of which could potentially interfere with the alarm function. Smartphones also enabled new forms of alarm clock self-sabotage. People would set their phones to silent mode and forget to change them back, resulting in alarms that flashed silently on their screens while they slept peacefully through what should have been their wake-up time. Or they would accidentally set their alarms for PM instead of AM, or for the wrong day of the week, or for the correct time, but in the wrong time zone. The smartphone alarm also created the modern phenomenon of alarm fatigue. The tendency to become so accustomed to the sound of your phone's alarm that you could sleep through it, even when it was ringing at full volume 6 inches from your head. This led people to constantly change their alarm sounds, creating a sort of auditory arms race between their sleeping brain and their waking obligations. Some people started using the most obnoxious sounds they could find as alarm tones, operating on the theory that if they made their alarm annoying enough, they would have no choice but to wake up and turn it off. This resulted in people waking up to the sounds of air raid sirens, smoke detectors, crying babies, or recordings of themselves yelling, "Waka." These alarms were certainly effective at interrupting sleep, but they also meant that people started their days in a state of mild trauma, as if they were being awakened by emergency broadcasts or natural disasters. Others went in the opposite direction, choosing gentle, pleasant sounds as their alarms, hoping to ease themselves more gradually into consciousness. But gentle alarms had their own problems. They were easy to sleep through, and even when they did wake you up, they were so pleasant that you wanted to continue listening to them rather than getting out of bed. There's something deeply ironic about being late for work, because your alarm clock was playing sounds of ocean waves that were too relaxing to interrupt. The proliferation of smartphone alarms also enabled people to set far more alarms than any reasonable person needed. Where traditional alarm clocks typically had one or maybe two alarm settings, smartphone users began setting dozens of alarms, creating elaborate wake-up sequences that would begin hours before they actually needed to get up and continue until they were physically out of bed and moving around. These multiple alarm strategies were based on the flawed premise that if you set enough alarms, at least one of them would successfully wake you up. What actually happened was that people became conditioned to ignore their alarms entirely, knowing that even if they slept through the 6 to 100 alarm, the 6 in 05 alarm would go off soon, followed by the 6 in 10 alarm, the 6 in 15 alarm, and so on. This turned the morning routine into a negotiation between your sleeping self and your waking self, with each snooze button representing another small surrender to the forces of unconsciousness. The psychological relationship between people and their alarm clocks became even more complicated in the smartphone era. Your alarm clock was no longer a separate device sitting on your nightstand. It was part of the same device you used for entertainment, communication, work, and pretty much every other aspect of your digital life. This meant that your alarm clock knew things about you that mechanical alarm clocks never could. It knew what time you went to sleep, based on when you last used your phone. It knew how many times you hit snooze, creating detailed records of your morning procrastination habits. It knew which alarm sounds you responded to, and which ones you ignored. This data enabled the development of smart alarm systems that claimed to optimize your wake-up experience based on your personal sleep patterns and preferences. These systems would monitor your movement during sleep and wake you up during lighter sleep phases, theoretically making you feel more refreshed. They would analyze your snooze button usage and adjust alarm timing accordingly. They would track your response to different alarm sounds and automatically select the most effective ones. But smart alarm systems also meant that your alarm clock was now connected to the internet, which introduced entirely new categories of failure modes. Software updates could change how your alarm worked. Server outages could disable smart features. Privacy breaches could potentially expose your sleep patterns to hackers. And connectivity problems could turn your sophisticated smart alarm into a very expensive device that didn't work any better than a mechanical alarm clock from 1950. The development of voice-controlled smart speakers created yet another evolution in alarm clock technology. You could now set alarms by talking to your device instead of manipulating physical controls. Set an alarm for 7 a.m. was easier than navigating through menu systems or trying to set digital displays in the dark. Voice-controlled alarms could also be more flexible. You could set alarms for relative times like, wake me up in 8 hours, or specific events like, set an alarm for 30 minutes before my first meeting. But voice-controlled alarm clocks also meant that your alarm system was always listening, waiting for commands, which raised questions about privacy and surveillance that people in the mechanical alarm clock era never had to consider. Your alarm clock could potentially record your conversations, track your daily routines, and report your activities to various technology companies. the simple relationship between human and wake. Up device had become part of a complex network of data collection and analysis that extended far beyond the basic function of interrupting sleep. Voice-controlled alarms also introduced new failure modes related to speech recognition. Accents, background noise, or unclear pronunciation could result in alarms being set for the wrong times or not being set at all. People began having arguments with their alarm clocks, trying to convince artificial intelligence systems to understand their wake-up needs. Set an alarm for 6:30 a.m. might be interpreted as set an alarm for 6:13 a.m. or search for information about alarm clocks, or play music by a band called Alarm. The modern alarm clock industry has reached a point of almost absurd sophistication, with devices that can simulate natural sunrise and sunset patterns, play personalized soundscapes, monitor air quality, and even analyze your sleep biochemistry. Some alarm clocks now require smartphone apps to operate, turning the simple act of setting a wake-up time into a complex interaction between multiple devices and software systems. Yet for all this technological advancement, the fundamental relationship between humans and alarm clocks remains essentially unchanged from the days of medieval monks with their water clocks and mechanical bells. We still don't want to wake up when we're supposed to wake up. We still try to negotiate with our alarm clocks for just a few more minutes of sleep. We still have complicated feelings about devices whose primary function is to interrupt the most pleasant part of our daily experience. The alarm clock remains one of the few technologies that we actively dislike while simultaneously depending on it completely. Unlike smartphones or computers or cars, which we generally view positively even when they cause problems, the alarm clock is fundamentally an adversarial technology. Its success is measured by its ability to make us do something we don't want to do at a time when we don't want to do it. This adversarial relationship has persisted through every technological evolution of the alarm clock. Mechanical alarm clocks were adversaries that attacked with bells and springs. Electric alarm clocks were adversaries that attacked with consistent, reliable electrical power. Digital alarm clocks were adversaries that attacked with precise timing and multiple alarm settings. Smartphone alarms were adversaries that attacked with personalization and convenience. Smart alarm clocks are adversaries that attack with data analysis and artificial intelligence. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of alarm clock history is how it reflects broader changes in human society and our relationship with time itself. Early alarm clocks were luxury items for people wealthy enough to have schedules that mattered. Industrial alarm clocks were tools for coordinating mass labor in factories and offices. Modern alarm clocks are personal time management systems for individuals trying to navigate increasingly complex daily schedules. The evolution of the alarm clock mirrors the evolution of modern life. From agricultural societies where people woke up when the sun rose to industrial societies, where people woke up when the factory whistle blew, to information societies, where people wake up when their personalized digital assistant determines they're in the optimal sleep phase for consciousness transition. Yet through all these changes, the basic experience of being woken up by an alarm clock has remained remarkably consistent. Whether it's a medieval monk being awakened by a water clock, a factory worker being awakened by a mechanical alarm, or a modern office worker being awakened by a smartphone app that plays the sound of Tibetan singing bowls, the fundamental experience is the same. The transition from sleep to wakefulness imposed by an external device at a time determined by social and economic obligations rather than natural circadian rhythms. The alarm clock history is also a history of human adaptability and stubbornness. Every improvement in alarm clock technology has been met by improvements in human sleep avoidance techniques. Louder alarms led to people moving their clocks farther away. Multiple alarms led to people learning to sleep through multiple alarms. Smart alarms led to people finding ways to outsmart their smart alarms. This ongoing arms race between alarm clock technology and human sleep resistance has produced increasingly elaborate solutions to what is fundamentally a simple problem. The latest smart alarm systems use artificial intelligence, biometric monitoring, environmental controls, and sophisticated data analysis to solve the problem of getting people to wake up when they're supposed to wake up. Medieval monks solved the same problem with a bell. and someone willing to stay awake all night. The complexity of modern alarm systems also reflects our modern relationship with technology in general. We expect our devices to be smart, connected, personalized, and capable of adapting to our individual needs and preferences. We want our alarm clocks to learn our habits, understand our schedules, and wake us up in the most pleasant and effective way possible. But this expectation of technological sophistication often conflicts with the fundamental simplicity of what we actually need from an alarm clock, a reliable device that makes noise at a predetermined time. All the smart features and connectivity options and personalization algorithms are additions to this basic function, and each additional feature represents another potential point of failure. The proliferation of alarm clock features also reflects our tendency to solve behavioral problems with technological solutions. Instead of going to bed earlier to make waking up easier, we buy alarm clocks that gradually increase light exposure to simulate natural sunrise. Instead of developing better sleep hygiene, we buy alarm clocks that monitor our sleep cycles and wake us up during optimal phases. Instead of accepting that waking up early is inherently unpleasant, we buy alarm clocks that play our favorite music or motivational messages. These technological solutions sometimes work, but they also tend to create new problems. Smart alarm clocks require setup and maintenance. Connected devices can lose internet connectivity. Apps can crash or update themselves in ways that change their behavior. The more sophisticated your alarm system becomes, the more things can go wrong with it, often in ways that are completely invisible until the morning when you oversleep because your smart alarm clock decided to update its firmware at 3 a.m. The irony of modern alarm clock technology is that we've created devices that are simultaneously more capable and less reliable than their mechanical predecessors. A wind-up alarm clock from 1920 had exactly one job and performed that job consistently for decades with minimal maintenance. A smartphone alarm from 2024 can do hundreds of things, but performing any one of those things depends on the successful coordination of multiple software systems, network connections, and hardware components, any of which can fail in unpredictable ways. This reliability paradox has led some people to return to simpler alarm clock solutions, embracing what might be called alarm clock minimalism. These people use basic digital clocks with simple buzzer alarms, or even mechanical wind-up clocks, operating on the theory that fewer features means fewer things that can go wrong. They've decided that the convenience of smart features isn't worth the risk of technological failure, when the stakes are as high as getting to work on time. But the vast majority of people continue to rely on increasingly sophisticated alarm systems, despite their complexity and potential for failure. This suggests something interesting about human psychology. We're willing to accept technological complexity and unreliability in exchange for the illusion of control over our wake-up experience. Even if our smart alarm doesn't work any better than a simple mechanical clock, it feels more personalized, more responsive to our individual needs, more like a partner in the daily struggle against unconsciousness, rather than just another adversarial device. The personalization of alarm clocks has also changed the social dynamics of waking up. In the era of mechanical alarm clocks, everyone in the household heard the same alarm at the same time. Modern alarm systems allow for individual wake-up schedules that can be precisely timed to avoid disturbing other people. Couples can have different alarm times, different alarm sounds, different snooze preferences, all managed by devices that are sophisticated enough to coordinate these preferences without waking the wrong person. This individualization of alarm experiences has eliminated some of the communal aspects of waking up, but it's also enabled more complex household schedules. People can work different shifts, maintain different sleep schedules, and pursue different morning routines without interfering with each other's alarm systems. The alarm clock has become a personal time management tool rather than a household utility, but personalized alarm systems have also created new social problems. The pressure to optimize your wake-up experience, to find the perfect alarm sound and the ideal wake-up time and the most effective morning routine, has turned what was once a simple mechanical process into another area of life, where people feel they need to achieve maximum efficiency. Social media is full of morning routine optimization tips, alarm clock recommendations, and sleep tracking data comparisons. The quantified self-movement has embraced alarm clocks as data collection tools, using them to track sleep patterns, measure sleep quality, and optimize daily schedules. Some people now spend more time analyzing their sleep data than they spend actually sleeping, turning rest into another area of life that requires constant monitoring and improvement. This optimization obsession has also led to the development of alarm clocks that are designed to be impossible to ignore or circumvent. These include alarm clocks that require you to solve math problems before they'll turn off, alarms that move around your room so you have to chase them down, and alarms that will only turn off if you scan a barcode in your bathroom or kitchen, forcing you to physically leave your bedroom to stop the noise. These extreme alarm solutions represent the logical endpoint of the arms race between human sleep resistance and wake-up technology. If people learn to sleep through loud alarms, make the alarms louder. If people learn to turn off alarms without fully waking up, make the turn-off process more complicated. If people learn to ignore multiple alarms, make the alarms physically impossible to ignore. But extreme alarm solutions also highlight the fundamental absurdity of our relationship with wake-up technology. We've created devices whose primary function is to overcome our own resistance to consciousness. Then we've had to create increasingly elaborate mechanisms to overcome our resistance to those devices. We're essentially at war with ourselves, using technology as a weapon in a battle between our sleeping selves and our waking obligations. The military has taken this concept to its logical extreme with alarm systems designed for people whose sleep resistance could have life or death consequences. Military alarm clocks can include strobe lights, bed shakers, extremely loud sirens, and automated systems that can't be turned off without completing complex sequences of actions. These alarms are designed for people who absolutely cannot afford to oversleep, regardless of how unpleasant the wake-up experience might be. Civilian versions of military-grade alarm systems are now available for people who consider chronic oversleeping to be a serious enough problem to warrant serious countermeasures. These alarms treat sleep as an enemy to be defeated rather than a natural human need to be managed, reflecting a broader cultural attitude that views any time spent not being productive as time wasted. The commodification of wake-up experiences has also created an entire industry of sleep and alarm-related products. Sleep tracking devices, sunrise simulation lamps, white noise machines, smart mattresses, temperature-controlled bedding, aromatherapy alarm clocks. The modern bedroom can contain dozens of devices all designed to optimize sleep and wake-up experiences in different ways. This proliferation of sleep technology represents a significant change from earlier eras when the alarm clock was the only technology most people used to manage their sleep schedules. Modern sleep management has become a complex technological ecosystem where alarm clocks are just one component among many, all working together to create the perfect sleep and wake-up experience. But the multiplication of sleep technologies has also created new forms of sleep anxiety. People worry about whether they're using the right devices, getting enough deep sleep, waking up at optimal times, maintaining consistent schedules. The simple act of going to sleep and waking up has become another area of life where people feel pressure to optimize, measure, and improve their performance. The data generated by modern sleep tracking devices has also revealed interesting patterns about human sleep behavior that weren't visible in the era of mechanical alarm clocks. We now know that most people don't sleep for 8 continuous hours, that sleep patterns vary significantly between individuals, and that factors like light exposure, temperature, and stress levels can dramatically affect sleep quality and wake-up experiences. This data has led to more sophisticated approaches to alarm timing, with some systems attempting to wake people up during lighter sleep phases when consciousness transitions are theoretically easier. But it's also led to a kind of sleep perfectionism, where people become obsessed with achieving ideal sleep metrics rather than simply getting enough rest to function effectively. The globalization of work and communication has also changed how we use alarm clocks. People now set alarms not just for waking up in the morning, but for conference calls with colleagues in different time zones, for medication schedules, for workout times, for meal planning. The modern alarm clock has become a general, purpose time management tool rather than just a wake-up device. This expansion of alarm clock functionality has made them more useful but also more complicated. Modern alarm systems need to manage dozens of different scheduled events, each with different requirements for advance notice, repeat schedules, and escalation procedures if the initial alarm is ignored. Setting up a comprehensive personal alarm system now requires the kind of planning that was once reserved for managing large organizations. The psychological effects of living with constant alarm notifications have also become more apparent as alarm systems have become more pervasive. Many people now report feeling anxious when they're not near their phones or other alarm devices, worried that they might miss important notifications or scheduled events. The alarm clock has evolved from a simple wake-up tool to an essential component of modern anxiety management. Some researchers have suggested that our dependence on external alarm systems may be weakening our natural circadian rhythms and internal time-keeping abilities. People who rely heavily on alarm clocks may lose the ability to wake up naturally at consistent times, creating a cycle of dependence where artificial wake-up systems become increasingly necessary. This dependency concern has led to interest in alarm systems that are designed to gradually reduce their own necessity, training people to develop better natural sleep schedules rather than simply overriding circadian rhythms with mechanical intervention. But these systems face the same basic problem that all alarm clock technology faces. Most people need to wake up when external obligations require it, not when their bodies naturally want to wake up. The cultural significance of alarm clocks has also evolved over time. In the early industrial era, owning an alarm clock was a sign of participation in modern economic life. People who needed alarm clocks were people who had jobs that required punctuality, schedules that mattered, obligations that couldn't be ignored. Today, alarm clocks are so ubiquitous that not having one is more remarkable than having one. People who claim they don't need alarm clocks because they wake up naturally are often viewed with suspicion or envy, as if they possess some supernatural ability to control their consciousness at will. The social pressure to be on time has also intensified as communication technology has made it easier to coordinate complex schedules. When most communication happened in person or by written letter, being a few minutes late was generally acceptable because precise timing was difficult to coordinate. But modern communication systems make it possible to coordinate activities down to the minute, which means that being late is less acceptable and alarm clocks are more necessary. The psychology of alarm clock relationships has become increasingly complex as the devices have become more sophisticated. People develop emotional attachments to specific alarm sounds, feeling anxious when they hear those sounds in other contexts. Some people report having dreams about their alarm clocks or waking up moments before their alarms go off because of anticipatory anxiety. The alarm clock has also become a symbol of adult responsibility and self-control. Learning to wake up when your alarm goes off, rather than hitting snooze repeatedly, is considered a sign of maturity and discipline. Parents often give their children alarm clocks as part of teaching them to manage their own schedules and take responsibility for their time. But alarm clock responsibility also creates shame and guilt for people who struggle with morning routines. Chronic oversleepers often feel like failures because they can't seem to master what appears to be a simple technological interaction. The alarm clock becomes a daily reminder of their inability to control their own behavior, creating cycles of guilt and anxiety that can make sleep problems worse. The commercialization of alarm clock technology has also created pressure to constantly upgrade and improve wake-up systems. New alarm clock features are marketed as solutions to common sleep and wake-up problems, encouraging people to believe that the right technology can solve behavioral and physiological challenges that may not be primarily technological in nature. This consumer pressure has led to alarm clock feature inflation, where devices include increasingly elaborate capabilities that may not improve their core function of waking people up at predetermined times. Some modern alarm clocks can connect to smart home systems, control lighting and temperature, play personalized audio content, and provide detailed analytics about sleep patterns and wake-up performance. But feature-rich alarm systems also require more user education and maintenance. Setting up a modern smart alarm can require reading lengthy instruction manuals, installing mobile apps, creating online accounts, and configuring multiple device integrations. The simple mechanical process of winding a clock and setting an alarm time has been replaced by complex setup procedures that can take hours to complete properly. The complexity of modern alarm systems has also created new categories of user error. People can accidentally set alarms for wrong time zones, wrong days of the week, or wrong devices. They can enable settings that prevent alarms from working properly, or disable settings that are necessary for alarm functionality. The sophistication of modern alarm technology requires a level of technological literacy that not everyone possesses. Technical support for alarm clock problems has become a significant issue as the devices have become more complex. While mechanical alarm clocks could be repaired by local jewelers or clock repair shops, modern smart alarm systems require specialized knowledge of software, networking, and digital device integration. When a smart alarm system stops working properly, diagnosing and fixing the problem can require assistance from multiple technical support teams. The environmental impact of modern alarm clock technology has also become more significant as the devices have become more complex and shorter-lived. Mechanical alarm clocks could function for decades with minimal maintenance and no electrical power. Modern smart alarm systems require constant electrical power, regular software updates, and periodic replacement as technology evolves or devices become obsolete. The disposal and recycling of electronic alarm clock devices has become an environmental concern, particularly for smartphone-based alarm systems that encourage frequent device upgrades. The environmental cost of manufacturing complex electronic devices for the simple purpose of making noise at predetermined times represents a significant increase in resource consumption compared to mechanical alternatives. But the environmental impact of alarm clock technology must also be considered in the context of the economic activities it enables. Reliable alarm systems allow people to maintain consistent work schedules, coordinate complex activities, and participate in modern economic life in ways that would be difficult without precise time management tools. The environmental cost of alarm clock technology may be offset by the economic efficiency it enables. The future of alarm clock technology seems likely to involve even greater integration with other smart home and personal technology systems. Alarm clocks may become components of comprehensive life management systems that coordinate wake up times with calendar schedules, weather forecasts, traffic conditions, and personal health data. Artificial intelligence systems may eventually be able to predict optimal wake up times based on individual sleep patterns, upcoming obligations, and environmental factors, potentially eliminating the need for people to manually set alarm times. These systems could continuously adjust wake up schedules to optimize for factors like sleep quality, daily productivity, and long-term health outcomes. But the fundamental challenge facing alarm clock technology remains unchanged from the medieval monastery era. Most people need to wake up when external obligations require it, not when their bodies naturally want to wake up. No amount of technological sophistication can completely solve the basic conflict between human sleep biology and social time requirements. The history of alarm clock technology demonstrates both human ingenuity and human stubbornness. We've created increasingly sophisticated systems to solve the problem of waking up on time. But we've also developed increasingly creative ways to avoid being woken up. The arms race between wake-up technology and sleep resistance continues, with no clear winner in sight. Perhaps the most important lesson from alarm clock history is that technology alone cannot solve behavioral challenges that arise from fundamental conflicts between human biology and social requirements. Alarm clocks can make it easier to wake up at predetermined times, but they cannot eliminate the basic fact that most people would prefer to sleep longer than their schedules allow. The evolution of alarm clock technology also illustrates how simple technologies can become surprisingly complex as they adapt to changing social needs and user expectations. What began as mechanical devices with single functions have become sophisticated personal management systems with dozens of features and capabilities. But complexity in alarm clock technology has also created new problems and dependencies that didn't exist with simpler systems. The reliability and simplicity of mechanical alarm clocks may actually have been superior to modern smart systems for the basic function of waking people up at predetermined times. The relationship between humans and alarm clocks reflects broader themes about technology adoption, behavioral change, and the unintended consequences of technological solutions to human problems. Alarm clocks were created to solve a simple problem, waking up on time, but they've evolved into complex systems that create new problems while attempting to solve the original one. The alarm clock remains one of the most universally used and universally disliked technologies in modern life. Nearly everyone needs one, but nearly everyone wishes they didn't. This paradox suggests something fundamental about the relationship between human nature and the technological systems we create to manage our behavior. As alarm clock technology continues to evolve, the basic psychological and social dynamics that have shaped their development for centuries are likely to persist. People will continue to need external assistance with wake-up timing, and they will continue to resist being woken up when they don't want to be awake. Technology can make this process more convenient, more personalized, and more sophisticated, but it cannot eliminate the fundamental tension at the heart of the alarm clock experience. The strange history of alarm clocks is ultimately a story about human attempts to control time, manage behavior, and reconcile conflicting needs through technological intervention. It's a history that reflects our ongoing struggle to balance individual preferences with social obligations, natural rhythms with artificial schedules, and simple solutions with complex problems. And so the alarm clock continues its strange journey through human civilization, evolving from monastery bells to smartphone apps to artificial intelligence systems, but always serving the same fundamental purpose: interrupting our sleep when we'd rather remain unconscious, and forcing us to face another day whether we're ready for it or not. The technology changes, but the basic human experience of being rudely awakened by an inanimate object remains remarkably consistent across centuries of innovation. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable thing about alarm clock history is not how much the technology has changed, but how little the fundamental human experience has changed. Whether you're a medieval monk being awakened by a water clock or a modern office worker being awakened by an AI-powered smartphone app, the basic experience is the same: the jarring transition from unconsciousness to consciousness, imposed by a device whose primary function is to make you do something you don't want to do at a time when you don't want to do it. The alarm clock remains humanity's most successful and most resented technological companion, a device that has followed us through every stage of civilization, adapting to new technologies and social structures while maintaining its essential character as a mechanical antagonist in the daily drama of human sleep resistance. Love them or hate them, we cannot seem to live without them, and they cannot seem to stop finding new ways to wake us up when we'd rather remain asleep.